thinking, we would talk, this whole idea of political correctness has me just twirling my brain around. And, you know, I did some research, and this was really interesting. Like, what are the 14 biggest, most terrible things that you could say that are politically incorrect, right? Yeah. So, to say to a black person, you're articulate, is in the workplace, is considered to be politically incorrect. To say to somebody who's transgender, oh gee, you don't look it. Mm-hmm. Politically incorrect.
Well, it's insensitive.
It is insensitive.
To them. They are so all the time on the verge of humiliation. I treat them, and it is so heartbreaking.
It's very interesting because somebody recently said to me a comment about, I think there's a new pronoun for some of these transgender.
There are a number of pronouns. And you can choose which pronoun you wish to use.
And she was of our age, you know, mm-hmm. ish, and talking about, you know, that she thought it was ridiculous. And my response was, but it will become the norm, because the young people will pick this up, and irrespective of what we may think about it, there's a progression of how things are accepted, right?
But that's besides the point. It's not just accepting it, it's that it is a physical reality that, if we have a little time for me to go into how this happens, in the womb, the first 2 months, when all the hormones are getting squirted in hopefully the right amounts, with some embryos, they're not put in the right amounts. So some get more of one thing, less of the other. The mix is not quote unquote normal. And that's why some people, and that comes from all of the toxins in our environment. The toxicity in our foods, in the air, and everything, the heavy metals, cause these irregularities, I'm calling, in everything, and in the development of embryos. So people actually, when they're born, have this imbalance of hormones that goes on throughout their lives, because that's what they're given.
So that accounts.
So sexuality is on a spectrum today, and it's really that.
Has it always been like that, or do you think that there are changes in our food and in our environment that are causing
people are more and more and more poisoned? When did it start? It started with the Nazis, with the Second World War, rather, where the foods were starting to get cooked, let's call it, and more additives and all kinds of stuff. So from the, let's say, the early 1940s, the food started getting all screwed up.
And then it took some quantum leaps of getting screwed up in the 60s and 70s.
So babies born today have so many toxins in their system, the poor little things almost don't stand a chance.
Well, that's really true. I mean, they've done studies about glyphosate and the fact that that's what's in Roundup. That's the whole genetically modified conversation.
It's in everything.
It is in every human.
That's right.
Any human that's ever been tested has shown it.
That's right.
And there's just it's so pervasive.
That's right.
So
the whole thing about transgenders, it drives me crazy on the right of the political spectrum and on the left of the political spectrum. The left doesn't know what it's talking about, really, because it just takes it up as if it's a political cause and using them as to their political advantage. The right doesn't know what the hell it's talking about. Can I say hell? Because
you can say anything.
It's just using it as an unreality, which is totally wrong. So they're both screwed up in their perception because it is a physiological and chemical thing.
So in the realm and what's so interesting as I started to do the research on political correctness, and I looked at some definitions. I'm going to come back to the transgender thing. So what got me really interested was the fact that manners and etiquette are defined as respect, kindness, and consideration that is what forms the basis of good manners and good citizenship. Right? That manners are a person's outward bearing or way of behaving towards others.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take out this word politically correct, just eliminate it from the vocabulary for a moment and speak about manners. And now look at the transgender. They're no less human. They're no less deserving of our respect and kindness. Whether or not you want a transgender person as your best friend and go out to lunch, that's a personal choice. But in terms of how we interact with people, it goes to manners and basic kindness.
It goes to really having empathy. I mean, if I see a poor animal that's hurt, I mean, you have to have empathy for all of God's created world. That's what I think.
And so here's some other comments about being politically correct, because this was so interesting. It's a linguistic weapon that started in decades ago. In 1934, this came out of Germany. All journalists must have a permit to function, and such permits are granted only to pure Aryans whose opinions are politically correct. And even after that, they must watch their step. Now, that's one interpretation of politically correct, which is the party line.
Right, and how did it come up in our more contemporary time?
Right.
It came up with the left.
Yeah.
It's with the
Bill
left.
Maher talks about that a lot.
I mean, you have to, if you have all these mini aggressions all the time that the left talks
these
about.
microaggressions, right?
Yeah, micro and mini. Yeah, but
so
micro.
Could you explain
usually,
the differences between micro and mini
well,
aggressions and
micro
how this...
is what you almost always hear. Microaggressions are anything you could do, say, or look like that could somehow hurt me, somehow do something bad to me. It's just a lot of spoiled little idiots running around, not being able to stand anything in the world because their parents spoiled them rotten.
So interesting that you say that, because I'm an Aries. I don't know
too.
People. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, I get along with Aries women.
Well, Aryan I'm not.
Right, with Aries women. Anyway, because and for those of you who don't follow astrology,
Do you know that I have a degree in astrology?
No.
Yes.
Oh my God. So we have to have a session on astrology.
Okay.
Because I really, it's magnetic. It's got to do with magnetic influences on our body and the push and pull of the planets. And Aries personality is very direct. We don't mince words. I really have to remember to go, okay, so if you don't mind, as opposed to, could you just do this for me?
In other words, not politically correct.
Yeah, a lot of the time, according to the current definition of politically correct. And sometimes it gets me in trouble with people because I'm just being me. I have no intent to harm. I'm not thinking about anything other than getting done whatever it is I want to get done. And then somebody's feelings get hurt.
Yeah.
And this has happened to me a few times, and my position on it is very clear. I will say, if I know somebody was upset by what I said, I'll say, okay, were you an idiot? Do you need to apologize for something, or were you just being you?
Oh, I thought you were saying it to them.
No,
say-
I'm saying this to myself.
Yeah.
Were you an
You don't
idiot?
even have to question.
No, I do, because did I overstep in some way? But once I established, oh, come on, I was just blah, blah. At that point, I won't apologize, because it has nothing to do with me. The level of their upset has to do with them and and how whatever happened hit them.
Yeah, well,
Button it pressed.
often people are very jealous of others who have a great capacity to organize and to function in the environment, which you do and which I do. And people get very upset with that, because a lot of people are just a bunch of bumbling, whatever.
I think that's true, and I also think that over the years I have learned to soften my approach in a lot of ways. Maturity, wisdom of the age, has helped me to mellow out as an Aries. I'm also much more emotionally healthy. So, an unhealthy Aries is not a pretty sight.
Yeah,
I mean, we can be pretty aggressive.
Just look at Hitler.
He was an Aries.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So, it's learning how to engage with people. And I've gotten pretty good at it, not perfect by any means. And still, if something I say or do out of complete innocence causes somebody to blow up, that blow up had nothing to do with me. I was just the one that happened to push the button inadvertently as I was passing them. And I have very strong feelings about that. And I don't consider that politically incorrect. I just consider either you accept me for who I am or don't be my friend.
It has nothing to do with being politically incorrect. It's just that people have to understand themselves and stop pointing the finger at other people.
Right.
That's all.
Likewise, if I get activated by somebody saying something to me, I do not go to that person and say, you said this and you did this and you made me feel. I go within and go, why did you react like that? What got triggered in you from that comment? Because that person was just talking.
Mm-hmm. Or that person was just talking silly garbage.
And that could be
wanted
too.
to do something, and then in that case, you don't let them.
That's a different
You don't
story.
let them push any buttons and control you.
That's the other side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this whole idea, of microaggressions, these unconscious, how they're defined as unconscious expressions of racism.
Well, everything for the left is racist. Everything.
Right.
Every single thing. Which is, really you can't exist. There's nothing you can do that is correct. Really. There are maybe a few things, but so few things that you can do that are correct.
See, one of the things I read about, like, the 14 worst things you could do is ask someone of another culture about the garments they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, and the suggestion is, if you're curious, Google it. Look it up. Don't ask the person.
Of course not. Don't engage with people. Why engage with people? Just go engage with your telephone, with
Right.
your smartphone.
Right.
That's...
And I would much rather go to that person
Of
and
course.
connect one-to-one and say,
That's
tell
right.
me about you. I'm curious. I want to know about you. And humanizing that person
That's
in
right.
the process. I was shocked when I read that. Now, maybe in a workplace, but even in a workplace, you have relationships with people. You communicate with people. At least I would hope so.
People don't communicate anymore. That's
Yeah.
the big surprise.
Yeah.
They don't know how to communicate anymore. Go to a restaurant and watch people under 40 sitting around the table waiting for their food to come, and every single one of them is on their phone.
Can I tell you something? For Thanksgiving, I had my son and daughter, my two sons and my daughter-in-law and my granddaughters and my nephew and his wife and their 2.5-year-old. And we sat down to eat, and the 2.5-year-old and my 4-year-old granddaughter both had phones. They were being occupied by the phones. And I look and I see, and the noise coming from my great nephew's phone was grating. It was a terrible noise. And I looked around and I said, you know what, guys? It's Thanksgiving. There's no electronics at this table.
That's right.
Because I don't want those kids growing up thinking that when they're in a group of people, it's okay to just go into your own world and not pay attention.
It's crazy.
When every study on happiness and human
Of course.
emotional health say it is each other
It's a
that makes
social
us
brain.
happy.
It's a social brain.
Right. So
You're just
they put them away, by the way. The kids are the whole story is that they put them away, but the price we paid is my great nephew screamed for 30 minutes.
well,
And
don't
I
invite
personally,
them the next time.
no, I'll always invite them, but I personally was better with him screaming than with that device at the table.
Of course not. That's not how you raise children, having them sit with this stupid thing. You teach them to interact and
It's the
listen
interacting.
and talk
That's
and
right.
learn
And being part of a
manners
group.
and learn manners and
Right.
learn yes and please and no thank you.
So do you think if we had better manners, there would be this issue? No, politically correct.
But
As it has evolved, it almost sounds like it's an issue of manners and no longer staying with the political line of view in that quote from the Germans.
well, because people have been on their phones, for 15, 20 years already, you have a whole generation that's grown up with it. It's not an issue of manners anymore, because manners, you don't just have manners with yourself. There's no more intersocial interactions. It doesn't happen anymore. You do it by texting. You do it, they don't even like when you call anymore.
Yeah, it's very hard to get a millennial on the phone.
You can't call. You know?
When my kids were little, it was made very clear to them when they had their phones that I paid for those phones and they better answer the phone when I call.
Yeah, but that's
and they
not-
always did, and they still do.
That's not what they do anymore.
Well, and that goes. I think that goes to manners. I think that goes to parents.
It goes to a lot of things.
Yeah, it's
It's bringing around the downfall of this culture, really, and around the world. You know, it was thought that because of the internet that people would be smarter, that kids would be smarter. They're not. They're dumber. They really are. Just teach in a school. I taught English as a professor of English in a few continents, and they're all dumber. They don't know anything about literature. They don't learn grammar anymore. A lot of things are just not learned.
Script.
No, they don't.
Which does so much for eye hand
That's right.
and art
They don't.
artistic ability
They don't.
and
That's
they
right.
don't teach it anymore.
That's right.
There's no art, there's no culture.
That's right.
All of that has been removed from the curriculum. And I think to a certain extent that goes to manners. I think people in the schools teachers may be afraid. I don't have research on this, so I'm just sort of
I know
talking.
about the universities.
Well, I'm thinking
You
about
have to-
lower schools. But
Yeah, but it starts with the lower schools. But when you get to the university, you can't give a student less than a B anymore. In graduate school or undergraduate school, oh no, because they can vote you out of your job. They have so much power, the students. And just for the most arbitrary thing, you know.
is it the tail wagging the dog?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was the other way. There was too much power on the other side, but this is no good either. This is really no good. No good.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about some of these things that people think are fine to say at work, but are these microaggressions. So, oh, you're gay? You should meet my friend. She is gay too. Now that's considered a microaggression.
Yeah, but it's actually not nice to say that to somebody.
It's kind of like going up to anybody and going, "Oh, you're single?"
It's kind of like when people come to me and
I
say,
wouldn't mind that.
"Oh, you're Jewish." Some of my best friends are Jewish, right? You know that.
Yeah, right.
You know that one.
Right. Right. All of a sudden, the smile then goes to, yeah, good.
You know, I mean, it's not like I have to say, "Oh, Anne, you have black hair." I mean, who has to say it? Oh,
Right.
you're gay.
Right.
I mean, who has to say it?
That's actually a really good point. And it's something that, it's funny. I have very little gaydar. It's a little bit better today than it was when I was younger. But because I don't look for that. I don't look for those distinctions. I just look at a person, and if I get a good feeling energetically from that person or not a good feeling energetically. And that's really how I operate with people. And for years, I had no idea who was gay and who wasn't. I didn't care.
Mm.
And I didn't have the ability to discern that.
Mm.
And I'm proud of that, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my areas. You know, I have my certification in LGBTQ things, and specifically in transgender stuff, and also in kink sex.
Kink sex, did you say?
You heard it right.
Okay, that's a whole other show.
It sure is. And when gay people are in an environment with other yellow people, vanilla is the word for us in the what did I just say?
LGBT?
No, the other in the no, I can't remember what I said before. We're straight. We don't do polygamous relationships.
Heterosexual?
No, what was the word I said?
I
can't remember. Anyway, stage fright. No. They know each other.
What do you mean by that?
One gay person knows another gay person without saying, "Hey, you're gay. I'm
Right.
gay too."
Right.
Just like I know Jews. I know who's Jewish.
I don't.
Almost always.
I don't. It's the funniest thing because I grew up in Brooklyn in the 1950s.
So that's pretty strange.
Everybody was Jewish. I thought the world was Jewish, with a few Catholics thrown in,
Mm-hmm.
scattered, peppered in there.
Mm.
And when I was 18, I spent a summer at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and somebody actually looked in my head for horns.
I know, that happened to me.
And I was like, what? And I didn't understand. In that moment, it occurred to me that the whole world wasn't Jewish.
Mm.
Because that was my upbringing.
Mm.
So I just I don't know, for whatever reason, people of color, I mean, I see it, but I don't see it. I don't use it as a marker.
You know how the horn thing comes about?
Yeah.
From
Go ahead.
a mistranslation of the word for ray of light.
Right.
By
Michelangelo.
In
right?
Hebrew. The word is keren, and it can be translated as horn, or it can be translated as ray of light. But because Gentiles mistranslate Hebrew scripture, they translated it as horns. And it was also politically advantageous to do that.
I was in Rome several years ago and saw the statue that Michelangelo did of Moses with the horns. And it was explained at the time that he was trying to create a ray of light.
Mm.
That's what they said.
Mm.
And that's how it got translated. So I don't know. I think there's probably some truth in both.
Well, both are correct.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of this conversation, and I think that the takeaway for me in thinking about what's politically correct or not, I don't really care what's politically correct. I care about what comes from the heart. I care about authenticity.
That's the whole thing. People aren't authentic anymore.
Manners, being kind.
Yeah.
That's what I care about. And and words are important. I understand how vitally important words are and the energy that words carry. But when everything anybody said is dissected to look for something negative, and if the people hearing are so hypersensitive.
They're not hypersensitive, actually. They're just selective. They're very selective.
What does that mean?
It means if they think you're on this side of the political spectrum, by something you say, it's wonderful. If it agrees with if it's the left and it agrees with their spectrum, But, and I mean, really, it seems, well, that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, we have a comment that came in. Text messages don't always express what people really mean to say. Often people understand certain messages the way they imagine would sound like and make assumptions of what it means, but they don't.
That's so true. That is so true.
Thank you, Natalie.
So, and people can get themselves in trouble with text messages,
yes.
too.
And I have to tell you, there are so many times I read a text message and I type a response, and thank God I read it before I hit send.
Right.
And almost always I'm
right. Not to mention
making it softer.
Right. Not to mention that as an professor of English, I am so appalled. Nobody uses punctuation anymore.
Well, that's because most of us are using the voice response and we're just talking.
Yeah, well,
into it. So it's just going like that.
But you know when it's been talked.
Yes.
Instead of Jane, it says Shane or something like that. I always know when somebody talked it.
So true. Or Anne is A-N.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I don't think this is for me, this culture anymore.
Well,
everybody's saying that all over Europe. Well, people will teach anyway.
I'm glad I'm in my 60s. I'll say that. I wouldn't want to be young in this world today. I really wouldn't. And having said that, though, I think the takeaway for me on this conversation is really
what
about...
What does that say?
Text messages are in many situations a way to escape confrontations. Yep.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true. To escape feelings, to escape interaction. So true. Absolutely right. Thank you for that.
And therein lies the rub, because again, it's the interaction with others from which we derive our happiness.
Exactly right.
And so as we create all of these boundaries, politically correct, and how we express ourselves, and
right.
Electronic boundaries that separate us from others, I think we're going to see skyrocketing levels of depression.
Oh, well, of course, and suicide.
It's going to be.
Oh my God.
So during this holiday season, because we're coming to the end of the half hour, during this holiday season, let's all commit to remembering kindness. Just remembering basic human kindness, and let that be your political correctness.
Yeah.
And not so much about the words, but your connection with others, because at the end of the day, that's what makes us live longer and happier.
That's right. And put down your phones and talk to one another.
But watch this.
Yes, watch us.
And by the way, I'm setting us up for podcasting, and more information about that will be available pretty soon. All of our episodes will be on podcast so that you can listen wherever and whenever you are. And YouTube, yes. So we'll get that all set up and let you know. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We had a great time. We hope you did too.
Bye-bye.